Embracing modular JavaScript not only changes the way that you write code, but it also changes the way that you use your own code and code written by third parties. Because when you start using modules in your applications, you need to find a better way to load JavaScript. We traditionally load JavaScript by adding script elements to a web page. But if we're using a lot of modules, we not only have to manage those script elements, but we also have to manage any dependencies that those modules rely upon. And of course, we could take the easy way out and just add all of the necessary script elements to every page within our application. But that is also inefficient because we're loading JavaScript that we don't necessarily need. If one web page is using one module that has one dependency, then we don't need to load the rest of the JavaScript. We just need the JavaScript for that one module and its dependency. In today's modern JavaScript development, we use script loaders. Their purpose is to load JavaScript that our own code and modules depend upon. And naturally, in order for a script loader to perform its job, the module or the dependency needs to be in a format that the script loader understands. One of the most popular formats is called Asynchronous Module Definition, or AMD for short. It's a format that's supported by most script loaders, and you can find support in jQuery, MooTools, Dojo, and many other frameworks. Now, you do need a basic understanding of script loading for this lesson. We're not going to go into any specifics, but I am using RequireJS for this lesson. If you want to learn more about this utility, head to requirejs.org. But even if you're not familiar with script loading, go ahead and watch this lesson. You will probably gain a basic understanding of script loading by the end of the lesson. Let's take a quick look at the files that we will use in this lesson. We have two JavaScript files and an HTML file. The first JavaScript file is called lesson09_module. This is going to be the file that contains our module. We will take the DOM utility module that we created in the previous lesson, and we are going to convert it to the AMD format and put that in this file. Then the next JavaScript file is simply called lesson09.js. This is going to be the file that uses RequireJS to download the module so that we can use it inside of this file. Then if we look at the HTML, we have two script elements, one for RequireJS, the other for our lesson09.js. Notice that the module file is not listed here. The reason being because we are going to use RequireJS to automatically load that file for us. So let's start by defining our module. We do that with a function called define. This accepts three arguments. The first is the ID of this module. This is optional. We do not have to supply an ID. And in fact, many and probably most modules do not supply an ID. It's referred to as an anonymous module. And while that might sound completely useless, I assure you it's not. We will see how it's used later on in this lesson. The second argument is an array of dependencies that this module depends upon. And these are simply strings that refer to a path. So let's say we have jQuery on my server. If I needed jQuery for this particular module, I could simply add jQuery. And if this is the name of the file on the server, it will automatically download and load that file. And of course, since this is an array, we can have as many dependencies as we need. So if we need to include another module called my module, we could do that by simply specifying the name of that module. And if my module resided inside of another folder, we would simply use that folder first, and then the name of the module. The third argument is the function for the module. You can think of this as the immediately invoked function in the previous lesson. And the dependencies that you specify in the second argument are mapped to the parameters of this function. So if we wanted to use the $sign for jQuery, we could do that, or we could use JQ, or whatever identifier that we wanted to use. And then we could do the same thing for the myModule module. So we could call that myMod. And then inside of this function, we would use jQuery to access jQuery and myMod to access that myModule. But for this lesson, we're not going to list an ID or any dependencies. So we can get rid of the first two arguments and simply pass in the function for our module. And then I'm going to paste in the guts of the DOM utility from the previous lesson. We have our counter variable, we have our generateID function, the create function, and then the return object. Of course, these are the public properties of our module. And that's really all we need to do for this file. So we can save it, and let's move on to our lesson09.js. This is going to be the file where we want to use our DOM utility. But first of all, we need to require that file. So we use the require function, and the first argument that we want to pass is an array of dependencies. This depends upon our lesson09 underscore module, so we can just use that, lesson09 underscore module. Now you could add .js if you wanted to, but you can also omit it, and RequireJS will download the correct file. The second argument is a function that will execute after the dependencies are loaded. And the parameters for this function directly map to our dependencies. So this is where I was saying that it really doesn't matter if we have an anonymous module, because we can give it our own name. And I'm going to give it the name of DOM. And inside of this function, we can use this DOM utility. So let's first of all create an element. We'll make it a div element, and it's automatically going to generate that ID. Let's create another element, and then let's write the values of these two elements' ID to the console. So console.log el.id, and then we would do the same thing for our second element. So let's save this, and let's run it in the browser. In our console, we should see two entries, custom ID 0 and custom ID 1. So RequireJS automatically downloaded and loaded our module. And that's really nice, because it did so only whenever we required it. AMD is a fantastic module format. It originated within the Dojo community, and it's been heavily discussed over the past few years, so it's had a lot of time to mature. We will be getting built-in modules in the next version of JavaScript, but until that time, feel free to use AMD. In fact, I encourage you to do so.